Once upon a time, there was a lion. Now, this lion was the biggest, strongest, fiercest beast in all the jungle. And all the animals knew not to bother Lion, especially when he curled up in the shade for his afternoon nap. However, one afternoon, a teeny tiny little mama mouse was scurrying around looking for food for her babies. And she didn't see the lion sleeping. And so as she hurried along, her long tail brushed the nose of the lion. Achoo! Sneezed the lion, very grumpy to have been woken from his nap. He glared down at that teeny tiny mouse who was frozen in fear, and he roared, "How dare you disturb me?" he said. "I should gobble you up." "I'm so sorry," squeaked the mouse. "Please, let me go. And for your kindness, I will promise to help you whenever you are in need." "Ah, ha ha ha," roared the lion. "How could a teeny tiny mouse like you ever help a great big lion like me?" And he waved his paw at the little mouse. "Run along, little mouse, you're much too silly to eat." And so she ran home to her babies. Now, the lion went about his business, and he soon had forgotten all about that little mouse. But just a couple days later, the great big lion stepped into a hunter's trap, and all of a sudden he was tangled in a giant net. He pushed and pulled with all of his strength, but his struggle only made the net grow tighter. And he roared and he roared, his great cries echoing throughout the land. But all of the other animals were afraid of the hunters, and so they didn't dare help poor Lion. All of the animals, that is, except the little mouse, who had not forgotten the lion's kindness. When she heard the lion's cries, she rushed out of her house and she cried, "Hurry!" to her little babies. "It sounds as if Lion is in trouble, and well, maybe we could help." And so the mama mouse led the way with her little babies scampering behind her. And they soon encountered the enormous lion who was trapped inside the hunter's net. "Don't worry, Lion, we're here to help," said the little mouse. "Oh, that's very kind of you, little mouse," said the lion. "But even I, with my great strength, can't escape this net. What could a tiny creature like you do to help?" "Have no fear," said the mouse. "I will save you just like you saved me." And with a squeak, she called to her little babies, and they all approached the net. And with their teeny tiny teeth, each mouse began to nibble at the net. They nibbled and they gnawed at those big, thick ropes, and it took all day and all night. But just as the sun was rising, the net fell to pieces and the lion was free. "You saved me," roared the lion as he smiled down at the mama mouse and her babies. "I'm sorry that I laughed at you, little mouse. I will not forget your kindness or bravery. You've shown me that even the smallest friends can be the greatest friends of all." And from that day forward, the great big lion and the teeny tiny mouse were always the best of friends. The end.
Once upon a time, there lived a fisherman. He lived in a tiny shack by the ocean and worked hard every day to catch enough fish to feed his many children.
One day, as the fisherman cast his line into the water, he felt a tug.
And he reeled in his catch.
When all of a sudden, caught on his hook, the fisherman discovered a golden fish, unlike any fish he had ever seen before.
However, the fisherman's surprise grew when the golden fish opened its mouth and began to speak.
Please, said the golden fish, release me from your hook. Set me free in the water, and I will grant you whatever you wish.
The fisherman had not caught many fish that day, but still he took pity on the golden fish and decided to let him free.
As soon as the golden fish was safe in the water, it turned to the fisherman and said, "Thank you, sir, for setting me free. Now, what is it that you wish? And I will make it be."
The fisherman thought of his family, crowded into their old rundown shack, and he knew what to wish for. "Golden fish, I wish for a nice big house for my family."
"And so it will be," said the golden fish. "I hope you enjoy your wish. And if you ever need me, call out to the waves and I will come."
The fisherman hurried home to tell his family about the golden fish. When he arrived, he couldn't believe his eyes. Where once stood his tiny shack, there was now a big, beautiful house with plenty of room for his many children.
The fisherman told his family all about his wish for a new house, which the golden fish had clearly granted.
For a while, the fisherman's family lived happily in their home. But before long, the fisherman's sons and daughters began to complain.
"Dad, why didn't you ask for a bigger house? We want a mansion with fine clothes and fancy things."
So the fisherman hurried back to the ocean and called out to the golden fish.
With a splash, the golden fish peeked its head out of the water. "I see you've returned," said the fish. "What is it that you need?"
"Well," said the fisherman, "thank you for the house, but what we really need is an enormous mansion filled with fancy clothes and fine things."
"And so it will be," said the golden fish. "I hope that this time you truly enjoy your wish. But if you ever need my help, call out to the waves and I will come."
The fisherman ran back to his family and found an enormous mansion filled with the fanciest clothes and the finest things that he and his family could have ever imagined.
The fisherman and his family lived in their mansion, and for a while, they were happy. However, not very long after, the fisherman's sons and daughters began to complain again.
"Dad, why didn't you ask the golden fish for a palace? We want a golden palace and a kingdom to rule too."
And so the fisherman returned to the ocean,
And called out to the golden fish.
and with a splash, the golden fish emerged from the water. "I see you've returned again," said the golden fish. "What could you possibly need now?"
"Well," said the fisherman, "I wanted to thank you for the mansion, but what we really need is a castle and a great big kingdom to rule."
"Ah," said the golden fish, "I think I know exactly what your family needs. Go, fisherman, and do not call me again."
So the fisherman hurried back home, but when he arrived, there was no castle. There was no mansion, not even a house. All that remained was a tiny shack.
And so the fisherman ran back to the ocean and pleaded and begged for the golden fish to return.
But the golden fish never appeared again.
And so the fisherman and his family, they returned to their tiny shack by the ocean. And they had no fancy clothes and no fine things.
But they had each other, and that was what the golden fish said. That indeed was exactly what they needed. The end.
Swim closer, children. I have a story for you. Story time!
Tell it.
I will. Okay. Once upon a time, very, very deep in the clear blue sea, there lived a little mermaid.
I know this story.
Maybe. But this story has been told by humans and merfolk for hundreds of years, and every time it's told, it's a little bit different.
Tell it, please.
Okay, so this little mermaid lived with her big sisters and her father.
King Triton, ruler of the ocean.
That's right. Her father ruled over all the creatures of the ocean, that is, except the wicked sea witch who was jealous of his power. Now, this little mermaid was a bright, thoughtful girl who was always asking questions about the world above the ocean. She carefully collected and studied all of the land objects that sank down to the ocean floor, like a ship's anchor, a fork, and especially a statue of a boy who had no fish tail, but instead 2 long legs on which to stand. At last, the Little Mermaid came of age and was allowed to rise up and explore the surface of the ocean. And there, she saw an enormous ship where a human prince was celebrating his birthday as well. As the Little Mermaid watched in wonder, a terrible storm struck, and the crashing waves knocked the prince from his ship. But the brave Little Mermaid battled the waves and swam with the prince to a nearby beach. Once the prince was safe on shore, the Little Mermaid sang him a song more beautiful than any human had ever heard before. But just as the prince was about to open his eyes, a search party of humans arrived and the Little Mermaid leapt back into the sea.
So the prince never got to see who saved his life.
That's right. But the prince was determined to find this brave young woman whose beautiful voice he would never forget. And the Little Mermaid, who had also fallen in love with the prince, was now more determined than ever to find a way to live on land.
Sea witch.
That's right. The Little Mermaid went to the sea witch and begged her for a way to become human. The sea witch agreed to give the Little Mermaid legs, but only if the Little Mermaid gave the witch her beautiful voice. And worse, if the prince did not return the Little Mermaid's love and ever married another, the Little Mermaid would have to return to the ocean and belong to the sea witch forever.
Why would she agree to that?
Well, the Little Mermaid was brave and determined, and she might not have thought through all of the bad things that could happen. Plus, she was in love.
Ew.
In any case, the Little Mermaid agreed to the sea witch's deal and was given legs. And finally able to leave the ocean, the Little Mermaid was thrilled to be able to explore the wide world above. She met the prince, who thought that there was something special about this young woman, although she could no longer speak to tell the prince that she was the one who saved his life. Still, the prince welcomed the Little Mermaid into his palace, where he was struck by her kindness, her sense of humor, and especially her interest in absolutely everything.
Uh-oh.
That's right. The sea witch grew worried that the prince would marry the Little Mermaid, so she used her wicked magic to give a visiting princess the Little Mermaid's voice. And upon hearing that beautiful voice, the prince thought that he had found the young woman who saved his life, and so he made plans to marry the human princess.
Couldn't she write him a note or draw a picture or something?
Well, the Little Mermaid did have one possibility. The Little Mermaid's sisters had gone to the sea witch and given her all of their beautiful hair in exchange for a dagger, which the Little Mermaid could use to stab the human princess and stop the wedding. But even though the Little Mermaid knew that she would have to return to the ocean and belong to the sea witch, the Little Mermaid would not hurt the human princess. On the day of the wedding, the sea witch came to claim the Little Mermaid. But the brave Little Mermaid used the magical dagger to stab the sea witch. And with that blow, the sea witch lost her power over the Little Mermaid and her voice returned. And the prince realized that it was the Little Mermaid who had saved him. and together they battled the sea witch.
The sea witch was defeated.
That's right! The Little Mermaid was able to stay human, and she and the prince became wonderful rulers over their kingdom on land. But they also liked visiting her family's kingdom under the sea.
And they lived happily ever after?
Yes, they all lived happily ever after.
That story was okay. Do you know any scarier ones?
Well, once upon a time, there lived a king and a queen. They were wonderful rulers, fair, patient, kind, and wise. When they had a daughter, the whole kingdom rejoiced in celebration of the baby's birth. But as the princess grew into a child, it became clear that the king and queen had a problem. Their daughter would not go to sleep. Every night, when the king and queen attempted to put their daughter to bed, the princess would talk, sing, yell, and cry. She would climb out of her bed, run around her bed, or even hide under her bed. And when the princess finally fell asleep, her parents would tiptoe to their room. But as soon as they got comfortable in their own bed, they would awake to cries of, "Mama! Papa!" Returning to their daughter's room, they found the princess wide awake. No matter what they tried, no member of the royal family could get a good night's sleep. Now, as time went on, it became clear that the sleepless princess would be a big problem. You see, the king and queen were so tired that they were falling asleep in important meetings, and they no longer had the patience to help the townspeople with their problem. So, the king and queen announced that they would award a chest of gold to anyone who could help their daughter get a good night's sleep. The news spread, and people came from near and far to help the princess get to bed. There were famous storytellers who came to tell the princess epic bedtime stories. The princess listened to every word, but she never fell asleep. Next, there were talented musicians who came to sing to the princess. They sang until the strings on their instruments snapped. Lastly, experts came with gifts of blankets and curtains and clocks, even medicine. But nothing could help the princess get to bed. It was a dark and stormy night, and the king and queen were at their wits' end when they heard a knock at the castle door. There stood a poor woman from the village. Though she worked day and night, she barely had enough money to feed her 10 children. She was wet and dirty and carrying her youngest daughter, who was no older than the princess. The queen invited them in and offered them dry clothes and food. It was then that the woman explained she was there to help the princess fall asleep, as a chest of gold would feed her family for the rest of their lives. Now, the king and queen couldn't imagine that this poor woman could help their daughter get to bed, as so many people before her had failed. Yet, they led her upstairs to where they found the princess, exhausted but stubbornly bouncing on her bed. The princess climbed down from her bed and approached the young girl. Meanwhile, the woman stopped to take a look at the princess's bed, which was piled high with mattresses and blankets. With a flick of her wrist, the woman began to remove each mattress one by one, and when she got to the bottom, she stopped. The king and queen watched intently. Even the two girls turned to see what was happening. The woman bent down to pick up a small green ball. "A pea," she said. No wonder the poor thing couldn't sleep. The woman threw the pea in the trash. "There," she said. "She'll sleep now. Mark my words." The woman ushered the princess back to her bed. The young girl smiled at the princess. "Here," she said, handing her her tattered old teddy bear. The princess took the bear and climbed into bed.
It wasn't long before her eyes slipped closed and she was fast asleep. The princess slept all night that night and many nights afterwards. The king and queen were amazed, and as promised, they gifted the woman with a chest of gold. But they also awarded her with a home in the royal palace, where the two young girls became best friends, and everyone lived happily and well rested ever after. That is, until the two friends discovered slumber parties. The end.
Mother Goose Club Playhouse.